Okay, it seems that we're live now,
Cool.
and well, we're going to be starting out one more episode of Dojo Live. We're broadcasting live from the headquarters in Mexico City, Nearsoft's headquarters in Mexico City, and also from Chihuahua, where my fellow Nearsoftian Janet Amaya is. She's located in a different office. And today we're going to have a very, very interesting talk. We're going to be hosting Justin Martin. Justin Martin, a young man with a very, very impressive background in technology. Of course, he's going to be doing the talking, but I'd like to introduce the topic that Justin is going to be talking today. Um, Justin is going to be talking about building applications from a product and business perspective. Okay, now, Justin is also co-founder and has participated in a number of endeavors, and I'm going to let Justin also elaborate on that. And Justin, welcome to today's broadcast.
Thank you, Carlos.
Absolutely,
Thank
it's
you for
our
having me.
pleasure.
Pleasure to be here.
No, it's our pleasure as well. Janet, thank you so much for agreeing to be here with us today. I think your participation is going to be of great, great value for our purposes. So thank you, Janet.
Thank
Okay,
you.
sure, absolutely. It's an honor to have you here both. Okay, let's go back to Justin. Justin, why did you choose this particular topic? Let's start with that because it's your chosen topic. You chose to talk about building applications from a product and business perspective. What do you exactly mean by this? Can you elaborate
Right.
for us and our audience?
Sure.
Thanks.
I think that it's an interesting topic for a number of reasons, but primarily because I, as a developer, and a lot of other people who I've met in the past, and my peers, we tend to like to build things because we like software and we like coding and we like just putting our hands on there and cranking stuff out, and we like difficult challenges and learning new algorithms and languages. We don't usually get into developing software because we want to build a particular product, because we want to build a particular business. We just like the code. And this is both, I think, a lot of developers' greatest strength and often our greatest weakness. It's rare for a business to just build software for the sake of software. You know, with the exception of a couple of companies like Google, it's usually there's a specific purpose for whatever software is being built, and normally it's a business perspective. Normally, software is built because it'll make someone some money. And you know, from that perspective, I think developers could benefit a lot from being able to see their software not just as really cool code and algorithms and fun stuff, but also as a means for generating income and revenue and profit for a company. If you can look at it from that perspective, it answers a lot of questions and solves a lot of problems before they come up.
Excellent. So that's the reason basically why you chose this particular topic. Now, tell us a little bit about, you obviously have chose this particular topic because you have some experience with it, or you have endeavored into building something. What have you worked on that has driven you to choose this particular topic?
Sure. I think that it really started to click when I was working at Groupon. So this was back in 2010. This is early Groupon. It was just a few, maybe 10 developers there. Really small, but had already earned the name as, the fastest growing company that the world had ever seen. So it was an exciting place to work. And the developers that were there were split into two camps. Part of the developers were the guys who were there at the beginning, back when Groupon was just the point. A couple of people who were just like geeks, heart and heart, just loved it, loved the code. Their code was very hacky and kind of sometimes difficult to follow, but really clever stuff. And then there was this new camp or different camp of developers who were there because they had heard it's a super fast growing company, because they had heard, if you want to have equity in any company, this is one that's going to, kind of kick it into gear. And so they were looking at it more from a business perspective. and how can we make this company make a lot more money and make it success? And I saw this dichotomy there, and it showed in pretty night and day the benefits and detriments from both perspectives, and not just through the code itself, which it became clear, but also through their ability to explain to the product and business the challenges and risks involved in approaching any new feature or new direction. I know Andrew Mason would walk by, and he was the founder and CEO of Groupon, would walk down and he'd chat with us and talk about some new crazy feature that he had in mind. And one of the early guys, who was one of the super geeky types, would be like, "Oh, that'll be so much fun. That'll be a great thing, and we can spend weeks and weeks on this, and we'll tackle it. It'll be just awesome." And then one of the other guys, who was usually more calm and collected, would kind of butt in and say, "I think you're right, but how is that really going to bring us a return? I think if we did this instead, we could get 80% of the benefit with 10% of the development cost." And he always looked at it from a very practical perspective. And so seeing that difference really started to click in my mind, that there are multiple ways to approach development and application construction. It's probably at Groupon that it started. Carlos, I don't know if I see you there. Are we still cranking through? Jeanette, I still see you. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm here. I think there was a problem with the connection of. Okay.
Gotcha. Well, we're still live. So I can kind of jump onto this idea, expand it a lot more, while Carlos comes back.
Yeah, please.
While I was at I'd left school to join on with the Groupon in 8th Light, actually, which was a software craftsmanship shop here in Chicago. I went through an apprenticeship there. And then I did this. I went to a few startups in Chicago and back at school, but then eventually moved to New York to start my own thing with a couple of friends called Night Evo. And it was on that project where all of the knowledge from Groupon and a lot of the other consulting stuff I had done before then started to kick into gear, where all of a sudden I was not only in charge of development, building the product and the engineering, the code, the server side, the app, and everything in between, but also figuring out what features we'd actually need and prioritizing, cutting out the stuff that I thought was really cool because it'd be really fun to what's actually going to provide a good experience for the people we want to build this for. So I think most of it came when I decided to try and build my own company, my own thing.
Okay, great. So that's when you decided. Sorry?
No, that's all right. I just wanted to apologize for having dropped out. It was a connectivity here, so you never know. With technology, it's a little bit unpredictable. So sorry if I interrupted you. But okay, Janet, you were asking Justin something, right? So please feast on it.
Yes. Well, I just was confirming what Justin said about that moment when he said, "Hey, this is what I want to do." So can you tell us what was the biggest challenge at that moment? If there was some point that you say, I'm not pretty sure of this or that, how did you decide with which way to follow?
Right, yeah, so I can go into the specific example. It was great. So Naivo was going to be this application, without going too much into it, for people who, they wanted to form a group of friends and then share a conversation with and photos and share their night, their day, share some experience with a group of people and then remember it forever. And this included their location. Now this was really early on, iOS application, and so there wasn't a lot of examples about how to continuously track someone's location over an extended period of time. And it became clear that I'd have to invent my own way to do it. And so I did, and to get the best quality data, which is what I cared about, because I was like, oh, the quality of the data is awesome. If I can get really high quality data, then I can really start predicting where people are going to go, and I can start using this as analytics, and I can start potentially from a business perspective, we could sell this information to local companies. I could see where people, and this is something that Foursquare started to do as well. But the major concern that kind of prevented me from being able to do this was battery life. And this was a practical concern. To get the data that I wanted, which I thought would be super cool, I needed to destroy the user's battery and render the product almost worthless within 1 or 2 hours. So the geeky, nerdy side of me that wanted a whole bunch of data had to be subdued in favor of creating something that people could use.
Justin, I'd like to remind the viewers that they can also interact with us by sending us their questions. If you're watching us on our page, you can see on the player right on the very lower or left-hand side of your screen a small strip that says "Be part of the conversation." So just click in there, and then it'll take you to a Q&A prompt where you can send us your questions, and we'll share them with Justin. So, okay. Having said this, okay, let me go back to you. Justin. Janet, are you done with your questions for Justin? For now?
Yeah, for now. Go
okay,
ahead.
For now. Great, awesome. Okay. Justin, let me go back to specifically to the business perspective side of the equation. Okay, so in terms of business, and especially having started out as such a young age, what kind of challenges have you experienced when it comes to landing, so to speak, this great, huge, big set of ideas that we all have at some point in our lives against reality and how feasible they are financial-wise, or in terms of their economic viability as a product? Okay,
Right.
So how would you overcome that, or have you ever had to go through this particular situation in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, it's been a rather painful process. Several attempts have resulted in failure. Several investments have gone nowhere, and a lot of time has been used up on applications and businesses which kind of fizzled into nothing. But I think that, there's a few key things that I've taken away that have echoed, and now there's a lot more literature about how to prioritize and how to make a company successful. And they usually resonate around 2 to 3 major things. One is really understanding your customer. 2 is understanding the business, and 3 is understanding the costs and the risks.
Mm-hmm.
So more in each. Before really diving into any new product or any new project, it's the most important thing is to really get an idea of who you're building it for. I think one of the serious failings of both business people and developers is they assume they know how the product should work. They assume that there is a way to imagine the perfect, the epitome of how this project should work and how people should interact with it and exactly what it should do and how it should look. And then they say, all right, now we're going to put it into a design, and now we're going to put it into code, and now we're going to make a website, now we're going to deploy it, all without ever asking the customer first, which is lunacy when you think about it, especially when it's so easy to get feedback from our customers. It's remarkable. So I think that one of the most important, if not the most important, is customer development. Figuring out who the customer is, figuring out what their needs are, what problem are you trying to solve, who are you trying to solve it from, how will that age group, that group of people interact. For example, for Airworthy, the majority of the people who are going to be using our application were 40, 50, 60 years and older. These are people who are newer to technology. They're not like the 13-year-olds who, their hand is their phone, right? They just know it inside and out, and they can do it in their sleep. These are people who are probably going to be pressing with one finger and trying to figure out how to use this thing. And so the application had to be designed in a way that the buttons were larger, easier to press, the interactions were simple and familiar, and the entire experience would operate pretty much how you expected without any surprises. That in contrast to when I was developing Brabble, which was another company I worked on in 2013, 2014, which was a social media application for sharing videos, photos, audio, and text. And our target audience was going to be the age group of 13 to 25, younger people familiar with technology. And so we had the distinct advantage of being able to build cute little interactions and really, stuff that people would have to explore the app and press around a lot in order to figure it out. And we were able to get a little bit of user feedback where people got super excited because the interactions were neat and they were clever and they were somewhat obscure, but the people were interested enough in technology and devoted enough to exploring it that they would figure this stuff out. And when they did, it was very rewarding for them. So understanding the customers that you're building for completely changes what you're going to build and how you're going to build it. But then there's also attacking it from the different side of how are you going to bring back the returns. How are you going to build this thing from a strategic and business perspective, not just getting the customers, but seeing the market and who else is in the industry, who else is building software that might fit the same needs that you're trying to fit. And this is actually, so I had been working on Airworthy with my brother and another co-founder for about 9 months. And we had been building this product. It was an app, it was a website, it was a wonderful server, and the idea was that we were going to make pilots' lives easier by doing all the stuff that they were doing manually right now. We were going to do it automatically, magically, automagically. And it was so cool. And the people we talked to this about, where their eyes would light up. And, some of these pilots who have been flying, doing the same thing for, 40, 50 years, they didn't want to switch to using technology because it would be work for them to figure out. But then when we talked to them about, but all you'd have to do is have the phone with you, and it would do all of this magically, and then send you a document which has exactly what you have right now. And they were like, oh, that's not possible. You could do that? So people were super excited about it. But we weren't paying enough attention to our competition, to the other players in the market. We were so focused on building something awesome. And we were talking about it with other companies. We were trying to get feedback. And in the end, one of the companies who we talked to early on ended up devoting a lot of their development resources. And they were a well-established company. They had, a huge portion of the market share already using their application, which did something different. But once they heard about us, they devoted a lot of their dev team to working on building a product which would make our product obsolete. And we weren't paying enough attention to our competition. And so as a result, the competition released something that did a lot of what we wanted our thing to do before we were done building it. And so you need to be looking at it both from who are you building it for, who are your customers, what do you need to build, but also who else is in the market and what's your timeline? How long do you have? Both Airworthy and in part NightEvo face that struggle. And the third and probably most interesting has been metrics. And this is something I'll talk about probably a little bit more later if we want to dive into it. But the single easiest way to create a company that's going to succeed is through metrics. And Handybook really excelled at doing that. And that's where I learned most about how to use metrics effectively to drive business decisions, development decisions, feature decisions, customer acquisition strategies. Every aspect of your business can be driven through metrics. And in fact, you can defer all major decisions until you have the right metrics to begin giving you insights onto what direction to go.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for elaborating on that. I think that kind of gives many of us a broader perspective. I like to read out a question from our audience. This question comes from actually one of our fellow Nearsoftians who is located way north in Mexico, in Hermosillo. That's like where the headquarters are. Hugo Ortiz. Hugo asks, yes, Hugo is asking you actually the following. He says, hello, Justin. The dichotomy you mentioned from your experience at Groupon resonates with the craft over art pattern mentioned in the apprenticeship patterns book. In
Right.
your experience, is it a big problem to have devs or developers that prioritize dev playfulness or art over solving user customer problems or craft? Let me know if you need me to repeat it.
No, I think that the question is it a issue to have a culture in which developers cherish the things that developers typically love, the geeky side, the craft of it, the art of building software for the sake of software, versus having more, I don't want to use the word zealous, but committed people to only building what's necessary to create a viable product.
Yeah, so like solving user customer problems, right?
Exactly. And no, I think that it's actually one of the greatest strengths. I think on a development team, you must have a group of developers, some of which who they just love technology. Any new thing that comes out, they want to try it out. They want to play with it. They'll be the kind of people who start using ClojureScript. They're already trying it on a project at home because they heard about it through some dev channels. They think it's the coolest thing, and then they are approaching all of their software from the not a let's get it done now so that we can get user feedback, but from a let's get it done right and steady, and let's build the tests and let's refactor and let's make sure that we're doing this the correct way from a craftsmanship perspective. You need to have a group of those people. One, because usually they're the people who understand close to the metal. They understand software through and through, and probably have a broader range of skills in software because they experiment with it, they play with it, and they love it. But you can't have a team of solely that, because you will often spend so much time just building the software that you forget to build the product itself. And so you want a diverse group, and then you also want the developers who will hone down and focus on, okay, well, that's really cool, but let's see if we can make it work for this specific thing in a day or maybe a week. Because ultimately, no one will have a job unless there's something out there that's going to be making money. And so I think that it's critical to have a bit of both. And if you can yourself be a bit of both, that's best. If you can be a geeky developer who can sometimes silence that part of your mind, realizing that right now you got to get something done that's going to generate some cash or at least some user feedback, that's the best balance, to have a group of developers who are both themselves.
Yeah, the having fun versus having funds part. Okay. Yeah, let's put it bluntly, right? Okay. All right. Janet, is there anything else on your end?
No, not for now.
Not for now. Okay. Well, let's see. Again, we wish to remind the audience that they can send us their questions through the Q&A prompt that they're going to see on their screen. Now, Justin, I know you and I had a conversation, a prior conversation about other topics, not only the product part, but we'll get there in a minute. But before we get into that, I can see that one of your earlier projects was Brabble, right?
Yes.
Okay, so and this is from my personal standpoint as a non-developer, because as I already mentioned to you, I'm not an engineer. I don't have this logical thinking mindset, but I'm from the user standpoint. I can see that, especially when it comes to startups or the next big idea, the next great idea that's going to change the world and the way we communicate, there's always this social media component. So I've known a lot of folks who are having this dream of building the next Facebook, for example, right? Or the next LinkedIn, right? So, and I can see that Brabble was something related to a multimedia sharing and social networking app. So you probably had this idea that there was already a whole bunch of huge things in the market out there. Okay, why did you decide to work on this particular project knowing that there was already a lot of stuff out there that you might be competing with? I mean, what made you different, and why did you, even if you were the little guy, what drove you to take that step? Was it a dream? Was it a
Right.
driving force? Was it a cash? Was it what was it?
So I think there were a couple of factors and reasons why I took it, but I think one of the biggest was I was looking for a business mentor at the time. I was looking for someone who could guide me to building a successful company from a business perspective. And also, I saw Brabble as kind of a do-it-all. Like, it would be a cool challenge and project from a technical perspective, because Brabble's intent was to do everything that other social media platforms were doing, but all in one spot, and then also a way to have a back and forth communication between the people on Brabble. So, for example, at the time, Facebook had no video sharing. Twitter had no audio sharing. There was no Periscope, and there was no Snapchat. And well, Snapchat actually was just beginning. But Brabble was going to be a way to share HD videos and audio and text and photos in a back and forth kind of way. And it was this sexy, like, epitome of the social networking, social media dream. So it was like right there. It was all of it at once. It was going to be a really cool project. But the biggest reason was the leader behind the project, the kind of CEO and the main investor, was this New York businessman, bald head, big blue eyes, and he had this kind of way of talking like, oh yeah, we're going to crush it, this project, we're all going to walk away from here, $2 billion in a year, no problem. We're going to be on a beach in a couple of months, you're going to be looking at me, I'm going to be looking at you, we're going to be sharing champagne, it's going to be perfect, you just wait, it's going to be a great project. And he was like the epitome of a salesman, like New York, New Jersey, broker, just perfect caricature of that. Huge blue eyes, you could not imagine.
I've met those types, yes.
Yeah, they're funny guys. And I'll be honest, I was a bit seduced by his charisma and his way to convince everyone around him that they were going to get rich if they worked with him. And I wanted to learn that. And so I joined it, one, because it was a cool project, social media, and from a technological perspective, we were going to have to do audio and video encoding and decoding and send it up to the server and do a lot of video manipulation, which was going to be cool. It was going to be a cool social networking project, and it could be the next big thing. But also just because I thought he would be a good mentor. As it turns out, he was an okay mentor. I learned a lot of things not to do, which is valuable at the same time. But it was a great project from learning how to bring together a diverse technical team. One of the developers, kind of anecdotal story, was the characters, the stereotypical, exactly what you'd expect of a super awesome, nerdy, down to the metal Ukrainian developer. His name was Sergey. He was fantastic. I loved working with Sergey. He had this way of, in the middle of a sentence, saying a joke that no one understood, and then just and just laughing, and no one would understand what the joke was or why he said it or how it was relevant, but he would just laugh so almost maniacally that everyone else would laugh too. And Sergey, during this project, it was Sergey and myself, and then it grew over time to several other developers. And because of my experience, I ended up being the lead developer of that project. And Sergey had a way of only focusing on engineering problems. That was it. That's the only thing he would look at. And he would do this thing where, so one example was for where to do the video encoding. We had this long argument, and it went on for several days, where we were talking about whether we should do the video encoding on the phone or on the server. And in Sergey's mind, I think it was partly because he was like lazy, but also because he thought it made more sense from a developer perspective to do all the encoding on the phone, on the device, on the app itself. Because then it didn't matter what kind of phone it was. If the phone did it, it could always do the encoding to its specific size. If we did it on the server, we'd have to encode it into 7 or 8 different sizes, and it would be a whole bunch more server-side work. and he didn't like that idea. And so I'd say, well, Sergey, we should encode it on the server side so that the download speeds are a lot faster, so that no one has to wait for processing time on the phone. He's like, no, 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 no. Let me tell you. Listen. Let me tell you. We should do it. And he would just go into, and he'd always do that exact same thing where he'd say no like 25 times before he'd explain what he wanted. And he wanted to do all the video processing on the phone, which from a geeky perspective made some sense, but from a user experience perspective, it didn't make any sense, because then anytime a user wanted to play a video, they'd have to wait for it to encode, which would destroy the experience. And so we had to negotiate back and forth on this, and eventually he came around and found a really, really clever way to do it while saving a whole bunch of space. But it's an instance of where the right thing to do from a like nerdy developer, like I want to get something that's cool, isn't always the right way to do it from a product or user perspective. But that was a fun project. I learned a lot on that project. A lot of things not to do and a lot of things to do.
Excellent. Thanks for the insight, because there's definitely a lot to learn on that particular side of the equation. Another thing that I wanted to ask you, if I may, unless Janet wants to step in. Janet?
Yeah, well, I have a quick question.
Sure.
Well, when you're building applications, you must keep in mind some stuff like industry trends, how to best apply technology, keep your client happy, as you already said. But have you been in the situation when you have an idea different from the business? How do you expose that idea, and yeah, how do you handle that situation in order to keep your client happy and develop a good product? What do you do? What will be your advice based on your experience?
A tough question, and that's an ongoing thing I'm trying to figure out. It's certainly not something I would say that I'm great at, but I do have a few. And I was actually doing this just yesterday. I'm working on I can't go into too much detail, but a project that's interfacing an iPhone app with a piece of hardware, an external piece of hardware, kind of like an Arduino, but a little bit different, and it controls some really cool device. And so it's a neat project because I get to do a lot of low-level C++ and C coding while also building an application in Swift and handling the network layer. And for one of the aspects of it, I already got the phone built and they're communicating, and I was showing it to the project manager, and then he had this idea. You could see his eyes light up, this bubble that came into his head. It's like, oh, well, what if in order to show them blank, we send a push notification from the device to the user, and then we start changing the color of the water on the screen so that it turns green, and then we have a little icon that pops up saying that, hey, you got to make sure you replace the water, otherwise, and yada, yada, yada. And it was this whole big thing, and if you looked at it from an eagle's eye view, it would have been really cool. But I told him, yeah, that's an awesome idea, and that's something that we could definitely do. But at the same time, if we just put a little icon on the screen that showed, you can tap here and it would show you, hey, you need to change your water every 7 days. And all we did is we send a little network and we poll it, once every 10 seconds. We could accomplish the same thing in about an hour, which, I mean, if we did the push notification and we changed the water color, we'd have to, and yada, 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 it would probably take close to a week. So we could get, 80% of the benefit for 10% of the cost. And I think it's really important as a developer to highlight that ideas are great, but time is usually the most important thing in any project. You're getting something done. If you can get 80% of the benefit for 10% of the cost, that's almost always. There's this really great story, which was told. I'm not sure if any of you guys listen to the Tim Ferriss podcast. It's a great podcast. Highly recommend it. Every third of his podcasts changed my life in some way. But one of the people he was interviewing was telling a story of how it was Sivers, Derek Sivers, I think is his name. Every day he'd bike home, and every time he'd bike home, he would try and bike home as fast as he could. And he would pedal his brains out, and he'd be sweating, and he'd be super tired by the time he got home. But he'd consistently get home in about 41 minutes. And by the time he got home, he was just dead tired. Well, one day he got sick of going this hard, and he felt like kind of going a little bit slower and taking his time. And he ended up, taking a new route, and he looked around and he saw the scenery, and he saw it was kind of a casual pace. And when he got home, he had done the trip in 43 minutes. He got home in almost the same amount of time, but one way it was super enjoyable, and in the other way he was racing as hard as he could to try and get just 2 extra minutes. My point with that is that a lot of the time, grand ideas and really cool stuff isn't always going to pay off as well as doing something small that works pretty well and opening up the door to other things. So if you can explain that to someone on the business side. The other way, not to kind of go too long on this question, I'm not sure if I totally answered it. That's a case where you see a simpler solution which might solve the same problem that the business person brings up. But the other side is the business person might not have a good solution, and you might have a better one as a developer. And this probably happens all the time, where you have your own big idea, and you think it's great, and you think that it's totally worth doing. Maybe it's some bigger factoring, maybe it's some new framework, and the business people are more conservative, saying, no, we should probably get something a little bit simpler done. That side is usually harder to argue for, but the best way to try and convince people, especially business people from this perspective, is to communicate through the one medium which both of you understand, which is cash money dollars, how much money it'll bring in. If you can show them, or at least give them a projection, some financial modeling, just a basic spreadsheet. I've done this multiple times. Usually you don't have to go as far as a PowerPoint, but it depends on how big it is. But just the back of a napkin kind of modeling to show, hey, right now we're getting $2 for the conversion of this page. But if we did this, which it might take a week, it might take 2 weeks, but if we did, I'm looking at this company over here, and their conversion rate's way higher, and it looks like they're having more success, and maybe we can get a 20% bonus in our conversion rate if we do this. If you explain it to them in monetary value or in ways that they understand, then you're way more likely to get your point across than saying, hey, if we don't add this new feature, we'll be falling behind and people won't respect us from a development standpoint, or hey, we've got a lot of code rot and a lot of technical debt. If we don't do this refactoring, we're going to fall apart in 3 months. Explain it to them and try and make your case in terms of costs and risk, and that way they can relate, because it's most people on the business side will not understand technical debt or the advances of new frameworks and languages and the advantages that they can bring. Even if you explain it to them in perfect English or whatever language you might be speaking, Spanish, French, German, anything, they probably still won't understand, and their eyes will probably glaze over and stop paying attention because they haven't heard anything about money. Not to say that business people only care about money, but that is the common medium through which we can communicate.
Got it. Totally agree. And again, in order to complete that, you need to understand the business, which you were talking about before. So,
yes.
Yeah, great answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Janet, for your question. Justin, picture this. I am just a regular, an average Joe who's non-technical, just a guy on the street who has this light bulb here in the top of his head. I just had this idea for a great app to solve whatever problem I can think of. But I'm not an engineer. However, I've heard about these wonderful WYSIWYG applications, like visual app editors, for example. Okay. Does that prevent me, or does that help me to not go and resort to software developers or coders I mean, in other words, if I have this great idea to build an app and I want to build a business around it, and I want to upload it to Google Apps or whatever, well, I'm just trying to word my thoughts. Bear with me. Okay, and because I'm thinking of this as from the non-engineering side. If I want to build this great app, but I'm not an engineer, but there are these WYSIWYG visual
It's
app
kind of like
editors. I mean, can I do without the coders? Can I do without the developers, or can I just jump into the business side without using an editor, a visual application editor, or without resorting to the coding part?
Yeah, and this is another one of those hard questions because there's no right answer. It's a depends kind of answer.
Mm-hmm.
If it is, I am, and my friends will often come to me because they know I'm a developer and saying, "Oh, I've got this great idea for this project, or for this app, or for this website, or this service. Can you help me build it?" Like, no, I can't help you build it. Like, oh, well, do you know anyone that can? I do, but are you sure you need a developer? I tend to encourage people to not use developers because, one, we're really expensive, just stupidly expensive. Two, most of the time we build something that takes longer than we say it will. It just tends to be the trend. It always takes longer than we think it will. And three, most people aren't product people. Even if someone has an idea, that doesn't mean they know how to turn it into something that anyone can use. So I usually encourage people, don't go to a developer first. Wireframe, 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 wireframe. Go to a WYSIWYG-like tool. Go to WordPress. Build it there. See what it looks like. See how it'll actually work. If you try and explain to a developer or a development team or an agency that you want a new e-commerce site that sells T-shirts and socks of all different colors for people of different sizes, they're going to come back to you and say, okay, $150,000. It'll take us 4 months. Let's start now. Right? Or you can just go and you can link up to a WordPress site and you can do a plugin with Square or some other service, and you can build it yourself in a couple of weeks. And it won't be perfect, and it won't be something that you can grow into. Well, it might be. It's rare, but it has happened, into a multi-billion-dollar business without adding some real software. But you can get the ball rolling without a bunch of developers. And I would strongly encourage anyone with an idea to try and build it without the use of any developers, because the hardest thing about building a new product is actually not usually the coding, unless it's a San Francisco, Palo Alto, pure tech company, cloud-based computing, or AI, or GPU processing, something along those lines. If it's a kind of normal cookie-cutter business idea that's niche or specific or some cool idea, build it without any code, even if it's just on paper and you got things moving around on paper and you just draw a little phone and it's got it looks like an iPhone and there's some things moving around on it and it's like just nothing more. I don't know if this is visible, but just a phone, and this is a terrible drawing, but you get the idea. Just draw it on a piece of paper, draw how it would look like, and have your mom press some buttons on it and see how she would use it. Do that before you go to any developer. Try and build a simple prototype before you talk to any developers, because the more you know about what you want to build, the cheaper it'll be, the less time it'll be, and ultimately the better it'll be. But that said, there are cases where, for example, you have an idea of what you want, some product, some great service in mind, and you will get a quote from several different companies. One of them will be the high school kid who knows how to hack together a website, and he'll do it for $600. One of them will be the overseas company in India, which will do it, or in Ukraine, that'll do it for 10% of the cost of a New York developer. And one of it will be a pretty experienced senior developer who says he wants $225 an hour, but can probably get it done in a week. And the final option is you find a technical co-founder. If it's a company that you see becoming, a billion-dollar company, something that has the potential to grow significantly and maybe get angel investments or maybe get venture backing, in that case, you almost always want to find a technical co-founder, someone who's got a lot of experience with technology and who can stick with you as it grows. Because if you go to overseas, you'll get back a bunch of stuff that might get you some initial traction, but then becomes extremely difficult to get past that early stage because the technology is the blocker. You might be able to get a prototype done by someone in high school, but as you try and get the next features, which get more complicated, you hit the peak of what they understand and know, and development becomes a serious setback. And you might find a consultant who was happy to do the first project for a week, but as you want to add more and more features, your budget gets seriously impacted. So it really depends on what your goals are with the project, but I would almost always advise don't go to developer until you have done wireframing like crazy. And try it on WordPress or a WYSIWYG. Try and build it yourself before you go to a developer. Is usually the direction I'd go.
Great, great. I think
Yeah.
Carlos. We cannot hear you.
So another kind of to answer it a little bit differently, if you are at a point where you know you want to get some developers on there, the most surefire way to get a group of developers to build what you want is metrics. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. I think it's a very important topic that honestly answers most questions in how company and software should be built. If you do metric-based development, you are way more likely to succeed. And what I mean by that is through every step, every feature, every new release, rather than focusing on or what the feature is, what it looks like, and how it works, you instead focus on how will we make sure it's doing what we want it to do. For example, if you are trying to build a e-commerce website and you want it to, let's go back to the t-shirt example, you want to sell some t-shirts, rather than trying to build the whole thing from okay, let's put up a website, let's make it blue and purple and have a buy button here, and it'll send the t-shirt to their house. You focus on, okay, let us try a regular gray button, but instead focus on how many times do people click it and then actually result in getting a purchase. You focus on the interactions. How much time do people spend on this page to figure out if they're confused or if they understand it? How many people make it past the shopping t-shirt selection page and make it to the color picking page to tell whether or not your funnel is working? And there's a whole bunch of different types of metrics. There's actions, checking when they click on a button or a link to make sure that they're, when they're interacting with your site and they're doing it in the way that you expect. There's engagement, how much time they spend on the page, if they're looking around, if they click on multiple spots on the page before they find the right button. Also, there's purchases, and these are sort of the interface metrics. There's the capital metrics, which are probably the most important, although the next metric I'll tell you might be more important. These are, how much does a customer spend on your site? How much money? What's the average order size? How often, what's the viral or not factor for each customer? For every new customer that you get, how many people do they share your site with? And if you can tell how viral it is and you can start attacking that, you can start finding little things that you change in your site that'll lead someone to share, on average from 1.1 people to 1.3 people, which makes all the difference in it going viral. And the last major metric is acquisition. You start tracking, where are these people coming from that heard about our t-shirt selling site? Did they find out through Facebook, which is really expensive to advertise on? Did they find it from Google AdWords, which is less expensive but still really expensive? Or did they find out word of mouth? And if you can track those things, then you'll quickly find out, okay, we've got to redesign the payment page. Okay, we need to make sure that the button is in the top right side rather than the bottom right, because we did some A/B testing and found out that more people seem to click on it when it's in the top right. All of the major design decisions and feature decisions become very clear when you have data and metrics to support them. And as developers, if rather than focusing on how to build a feature and what it'll look like, we focus on how will we know that it's working. Same with test-driven development. It's the same principle except from a business perspective. Metrics-driven development is the most sure way that you will end up with a successful product.
Great. In your experience, what has been the biggest change you have to done based on this information?
That's tough. I think that I'm not sure if this is the biggest, but it's the first one that comes to mind that was very impactful. This is when I was working at Handybook, and we were in the midst of doing some big redesigns, and we weren't quite sure how we wanted to do it. And we were trying to redesign the home account page. And while doing so, our designers came up with some ideas of what it might look like. And the reason was we wanted to encourage people from that page to repurchase. So what they're viewing their stuff that they've already bought, well, how can we encourage them to buy some more? And we tried something, and it was not a huge change, but after the fact, we realized that it was a fundamental change. Had we not been tracking the amount of people that would make a purchase after visiting that page, if we had not been watching that funnel, we would have lost over 50% of the people who bought stuff from that page. We made a change that made sense in our head that we thought would work, but it drastically cut how many people were buying from that page. It was further confounded by the fact that our growth was rising. So if we only had looked at overall growth, we might have said, hey, it's working. But because we had the specific metrics, we realized that it was actually a detrimental change, and we were able to reverse it and get our conversion on that page back to about where it was. And then later we tried revisions that proved more successful.
Well, good example.
It strongly drove what changes we made. It's very important.
Great. Thank you, Justin. And thank you again, Janet, for your question. Justin, surprisingly, we have almost used up all of our chunk of time. We still have a good 5 minutes or something to wrap up. In doing so, right now I think it's relevant because there was a meeting here about well, a number of topics, but one of them was to build, one of the goals for this year is to build 4 products, that we're going to become intellectual property of the company, and then we're going to promote 4 products that are going to be designed, created internally. Okay, so taking that into consideration, and given the current market conditions in terms of things that are popping up everywhere, every day, what sort of trends have you spotted as an entrepreneur in order to drive a successful endeavor, such as to building a new product of any kind?
Probably the biggest trend right now that I've seen is it is much, much harder to get your product out there. The market's saturated. Whether you're building a website, whether you're building an app, or a new service, there are so many new products and services coming out every day that it's almost impossible to find new ones. One of my friends had released an app recently. It was a variation on a social media app that was about sharing how you feel right now with a GIF and an emoji and an emotion. And the biggest challenge that he faced was, how do I get the word out? He released it. It was a great looking app that worked well. It didn't crash. It was a simple interface. It provided utility and use. But once he released it, and this one was in particular to the App Store, he got nothing back. He got no traction. The only people that joined were friends and family and people that they told. And it was only word of mouth. And so the biggest challenge, I think now, is marketing. Beyond even development, beyond even your business strategy. I think that any new product you start building now should be marketing first. Before you even start talking about what the main features are, you got to start talking about, how do we get the word out that this thing exists, and how do we get people to start using it? Because ultimately, you could build the best product in the world. If no one knows about it, it's not worth anything. And that's probably the biggest trend I'm seeing right now, just an oversaturation of applications.
Not to mention the fact that it actually has to make some kind of sense, right?
Yeah, it does have to make some sense.
Yeah, this is great, but what is it for, right? It doesn't make any sense.
Exactly.
All right. Okay, we have one more question from the audience, and again, this is from our fellow Nearsoftian, Hugo. Hugo is asking you, do you agree with the general idea that there is a lot of demand for software developers and not enough qualified developers? Or in your experience, how are experienced business people and founders looking for the right talent?
Yeah, Hugo, I completely agree. There's a lot of dev schools right now, a lot of dev boot camps, and people will come out of a 9-week program, and suddenly they're a Ruby on Rails developer, and they're being hired and paid $70,000 a year, working for a big company that needs reliable software. And there's a ton of demand for developers, so this is possible. A company that's looking to grow really fast can get a little bit desperate, and they'll start hiring very junior developers. And I think my dad said this very well, and I'm going to paraphrase. Every couple of years, there's twice as many developers as there used to be. And that means that there's always going to be more new developers than there are experienced ones. And the result is that there's a lot of crappy code out there, a lot of it. And the mentors who are at any company are often not listened to because they are outnumbered by the novices, or rather the less experienced developers. I think that there needs to be a cry for craftsmanship in our industry, in software as a whole, pretty much everywhere around the world. We need to start remembering that doing something right is way better than doing it with 10 people fast. The example I gave earlier was you might be able to hire a senior developer for $225 an hour who will get it done quick and faster than a team overseas where they've got 10 developers who are all fairly junior. For 1/10 the cost, it'll take them 10 times as long to get it done. It cannot be overemphasized, the importance of having senior developers on your team or building your software. Seniority and experience is probably the most important thing in development. It's a craft. There's no science to it yet, so.
But you mentioned overseas or offshore, or people in Ukraine and India. And I've also heard you mention several times the cost. So do you think cost is the only consideration when it comes to choosing your development teams?
No, I think the most important consideration is the quality of the code that they'll build. The reason I mentioned India in particular was because when I worked at 8th Light and in some of the contracting work that I've done, it's usually they tried to get it built in India because it was going to be a lot cheaper, and then they got back a pile of code that no one else could use, and so they were looking to rebuild the entire project from scratch in whatever country they were in.
So talk about rework.
Yeah. But I think that the quality of the software development team is more important. Even if they cost more, software is going to cost a certain amount regardless of who builds it. If you get cheap developers to try and build it fast, they're going to take longer to build it. If you get a couple of really expensive developers, they're going to build it steadily and it'll get done faster. It's probably going to cost the same either way. So might as well do it right the first time and get some high quality software developers rather than really cheap ones.
And do you think that issues like time zone differences or cultural differences get in the way of a good quality code?
I think that as long as you have a means of communicating on a daily basis and that everyone is able to express themselves and their opinions clearly, no. I think that you can develop a quality product from anywhere in the world with anyone in the world as long as both parties can communicate their concerns and their risks.
Excellent. Okay, Justin, we have just approached our time limit. I would very much like to thank you for having agreed to be here with us. We're going to be in touch because we're going to be sending you quite soon, along with your dads as well, some tokens of appreciation, which are non-digital in nature. So we're going to FedEx them to you, by the way.
Real physical things?
Yeah, like something physical things, non-digital. You cannot download them. We cannot email them to you. Okay, so yeah, I really appreciate your, like I said, your having agreed to share with us today your views, your expertise, your insights, and your encouragement. And also, I want to thank Janet for for her priceless assistance and participation. I want to thank you both for having been here. I really look forward to having you again soon at some point. And is there anything you would like to tell our audience before we go, Justin?
Just that you can reach out to me if you have any other questions. I'm on Twitter at Justin Martin M.
You want to write it down and show it to us on screen?
Sure. You can reach out to me there.
To the non-digital part.
Right. And I'd be happy to get back to you.
Yeah.
About any further questions you have, or if you just want to chit chat and.
Absolutely. I'm sure a lot of folks here. Visible. Hold on one second. Let me just. Okay. At Justin Martin M. Is that an M at the end?
Yeah, it's my middle name, Michael.
Okay. Michael. Okay.
I probably should get a better name. That's my Twitter handle.
That's fine. That's perfect. All right. There you have it, folks. So again, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Sure,
Thanks,
my pleasure.
everyone.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll I'm going to be sending you pretty soon the link to this episode that's going to be uploaded to our page, and so that you and each and every one of our viewers can see it at a later time at their convenience. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Janet. Yeah. And you have a great day. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.